All right, so we're diving into crypto today, and more specifically, a legal showdown that's got everyone talking. You actually sent us some intel on this, about this court hearing with Richard Hart, the guy behind Hex Pulse Chain and PulseX. And the SEC is coming after him. They're not too happy with how he's doing things.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because this case really exposes the challenges U.S. regulators are facing in this decentralized global crypto landscape.
Right, Hart's a pretty controversial figure, lives outside the U.S., built these projects on pushing boundaries, and now the SEC is saying, wait a minute, those crypto products you created, we think those are actually securities, and you got to play by our rules. But the first hurdle for them, proving U.S. courts. Have any say in this, since Hart isn't even here?
Exactly. The SEC's argument hinges on this idea that because Hart's website and videos are accessible in the U.S., he was targeting U.S. investors.
But doesn't that seem, kind of flimsy? Anyone anywhere can access websites and YouTube right now.
You got it. Hart's lawyers were quick to point that out, even brought up past cases supporting their argument. Just having a global online presence isn't enough.
So what did the SEC do when that didn't stick?
Well, they tried this argument that Hart's software, like the actual code for his projects, acted as like these alter egos, essentially extensions of himself, subject to U.S. jurisdiction.
Hold on. They wanted to sue lines of code. That seems pretty out there.
Yeah, it does. And even the SEC seemed to backpedal a little bit when the judge started asking some tough questions. We'll see if that argument goes anywhere.
Okay, so jurisdiction's already a mess. But then things got even wilder. When Hart's team started picking apart the SEC's timeline, they're trying to say Hart made all these statements, that influenced investors. But his lawyers presented a whole different story.
Yeah, for example, the SEC tried to link investor actions from way back in 2020 to things Hart said at a 2022 conference, almost as if his words could time travel and impact decisions from 2 years prior.
Wait, that makes zero sense. How did they even try to explain that?
Well, their reasoning for Pulse Chain and PulseX relied on this statement from a volunteer developer. That said, the contribution deadlines were unofficially extended. So even though there were these cutoffs, some people who missed them supposedly still got tokens.
So they're trying to stretch the timeline to make it seem like Hart's later statements were influencing those earlier investments. Clever, but did the judge buy it?
It seemed like she was skeptical,
Yeah.
especially when it came to Hex. The timeline for that clearly ended in 2020, long before the statements the SEC was fixated on.
Okay, so jurisdiction is shaky, the timeline's all over the place. What else is the SEC going after Hart for?
Well, this is where the fraud allegations come in. They claim Hart misled investors and misused their funds. Specifically, they're saying he took money people invested and spent it on luxury items for himself instead of developing the projects as promised.
The classic misuse of funds accusation. But I remember reading something about a twist, something to do with blockchain transparency, right?
Exactly. Hart's defense is that all his transactions are recorded on the blockchain for everyone to see. He argues there was nothing hidden about his spending.
So is that enough to clear him of the fraud charges?
Well, the SEC tried to use a previous case, SEC versus Plex Corp, as an example of someone found guilty of fraud, even though they lived outside the U.S. But here's the key difference. In that case, there was tons of evidence of targeted marketing to U.S. investors. They had Facebook ads, U.S. payment accounts. They even traveled here for business.
And Hart didn't do any of that.
Nope. His team emphasized that he simply posted a crypto wallet address online, open to anyone in the world. He didn't control who sent funds or where they were located.
All right, so we got a jurisdiction mess, a wobbly timeline, and now these fraud allegations getting poked full of holes. Things aren't looking too good for the SEC, are they?
It's definitely not a slam dunk for them. But there are a few more twists in this story. You know how crypto is sometimes seen as this, form of free speech?
Yeah.
Well, get this. Hart's lawyer compared donating to his project to burning a flag.
Whoa, hold on. That's a bold comparison. How did that even come up?
Well, the judge was trying to understand why people would send money to Hart's projects, knowing they might not get anything back. Remember, Hart was very upfront about that, even calling it a sacrifice.
Yeah, it definitely seems strange. Why would people willingly give money with no expectation of profit?
Well, Hart's lawyer argued they were donating to a cause they believed in, a form of political expression protected by the court, just like donating to a campaign. Or yes, even burning a flag in protest.
So he's saying sending crypto was like making a statement, protected under free speech. That's a fascinating argument. What was the judge's reaction?
She seemed genuinely intrigued by the concept, trying to understand how sending cryptocurrency could be viewed as a form of protected speech.
Yeah.
And then came another surprise. That caught everyone off guard, even the judge.
Don't leave me hanging. What happened?
Turns out nearly $27 million of the money people sacrificed to Pulse Chain actually went to charity.
And the SEC left this little detail out of their complaint. Wow. That's a huge omission. You said this surprised the judge. What was her reaction?
She was visibly taken aback. It definitely puts a dent in the SEC's argument that Hart was just pocketing all the money for himself.
This is getting good. So we've got jurisdiction confusion, timeline discrepancies, fraud allegations on shaky ground, a free speech comparison, and now this bombshell charitable donation. What happens next?
Well, Judge, we'll review all the evidence and issue a written decision.
So what are the possibilities here? Could this whole case get tossed out?
It's possible she could dismiss the entire case, or she could decide to allow some or all of it to move forward. But it's crucial to remember this was all about procedure.
Meaning?
The judge wasn't deciding if the SEC's claims were true or not, just whether they had enough evidence to justify taking this case further.
So even if it does continue, Hart isn't automatically guilty of anything.
Precisely.
Right.
This is just the beginning. And we'll have to wait for the judge's decision to see where things go from here.
This has been a wild ride so far, and I'm hooked. I can't wait to see what happens next. But before we dive into the potential outcomes and what this all means for the crypto world, let's shift gears and explore what this could mean for you, the listener. This case is a real nail-biter, you know. We've got this legal tug-of-war going on, and you never know who's going to pull ahead next. But before we get into all the potential outcomes and what this means for crypto in general, let's bring it home for you, the listener. What does all this mean for someone who's just trying to navigate this crazy crypto world?
One of the things that makes this case so thought-provoking is that it forces us to question our assumptions about finance and technology. You know, we're so accustomed to these traditional systems with clear rules and these central authorities, but crypto just turns all of that on its head.
It really does. It feels like we're stepping into this whole new dimension where the old rules don't apply, which is exciting, but also a bit unnerving, right?
Exactly. And this case really exposes the struggle that our legal and regulatory systems are facing when they're confronted with this rapid pace of technological change.
It goes way beyond Richard Hart or his projects. This is about the future of finance itself, the role of technology in our lives, and finding that balance between individual freedom and the need for accountability. It impacts everyone, even if you're not like knee-deep in crypto.
Absolutely. This is like a wake-up call that the world is changing rapidly, and we need to adapt our thinking to keep pace.
So as we unravel this further, I want to leave you with a couple of thought-provoking questions. First, and this is a big one, does knowing Hart donated millions to charity change how you view the SEC's case? Does it like shift your perspective at all on his actions?
It definitely throws a wrench in the narrative. It challenges us to move beyond these simple labels of good guy and bad guy. And it raises some really interesting questions about the role charitable acts can play in legal situations.
Absolutely. Second, what do you think this means for future crypto regulations, especially with projects that are led by people outside the U.S.? Are we going to see more of these global legal battles?
It could set a precedent for how we determine jurisdiction in this decentralized landscape. And it could also shape how regulators approach that balance between fostering innovation and safeguarding investors.
Right, and here's the million-dollar question. How does all of this make you feel about the future of decentralized finance? Are you optimistic about crypto's potential to like revolutionize the financial system, or does all of this uncertainty kind of worry you?
I mean, these are questions that we all need to be pondering as we navigate this like uncharted territory. You know there are no easy answers and the stakes are high, but one thing's for sure, crypto is here to stay, and it's going to keep pushing us to rethink our assumptions as this landscape evolves.
Now, getting back to the Hart case, you mentioned earlier that the SEC might have been a little blindsided by that whole charitable donation revelation. Could that actually hurt their case?
Well, it's something the judge will definitely weigh. You know, the whole foundation of the SEC's argument is that Hart acted deceptively and benefited personally at the expense of investors.
But donating millions to charity kind of throws a wrench in that narrative, doesn't it? It's hard to argue that he was driven solely by greed if he was giving so much away.
Exactly. It suggests there might have been more to his actions. You know, the judge could interpret those charitable donations as evidence that Hart genuinely believed in his projects and that he wanted to use them for good.
So it's like the SEC accidentally scored an own goal by not mentioning the donations in their complaint.
It's possible they might have underestimated their significance or just hoped they would fly under the radar.
But now it's out in the open, and it could backfire on them big time.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. You mentioned this case could have these, massive implications for the future of crypto regulation. Can you break that down for us a little bit? What are some of the key questions that this raises about how governments should handle the regulation of decentralized finance? I think one of the most fundamental questions is how to define jurisdiction in a world without borders.
Right. Crypto doesn't care about lines on a map.
Exactly. So if someone creates a crypto project outside the U.S., does the U.S. government have the right to regulate it? And if so, what are the rules of engagement?
That's a tough one. I bet governments worldwide are wrestling with that right now.
They are, and there's no simple answer. This case could establish a precedent that clarifies how jurisdiction functions within the crypto space.
So jurisdiction's a huge piece of the puzzle. What other, regulatory questions does this case bring to the table?
Another big one is finding that sweet spot between fostering innovation and protecting consumers.
Right, because you want to encourage new technology and growth, but you also want to prevent people from getting scammed or taken advantage of.
Precisely. It's a delicate balance. Too much regulation can stifle innovation, but too little can leave people vulnerable.
So could this case help define that balance?
It could. The judge's ruling could have a ripple effect on how regulators approach the task of overseeing the crypto industry.
So we've got jurisdiction and the balance between innovation and protection. Those are two biggies. Anything else?
Well, we also need to grapple with this fundamental question of what cryptocurrencies are. Are they securities, commodities, currencies, or something else entirely? The way we classify them has major implications for how they're regulated.
That makes sense. The classification determines, the rules of the game.
Right. If a cryptocurrency is considered a security, it falls under a whole bunch of regulations. That could be pretty burdensome. That's why the debate over classification is so heated.
So could this case offer some insight into how the courts view the legal status of crypto?
It's possible the judge's ruling could offer some clarity on how cryptocurrencies are seen within our existing securities laws.
Okay, so we've got jurisdiction, the balance between innovation and consumer protection, and the legal definition of crypto. Three major questions this case brings to light. Anything else?
Yeah, one more critical question revolves around the very nature of decentralization. One of crypto's core principles is this absence of a central authority controlling the system. But how does that work in a legal context?
Right, because if there's no one in charge, who do you hold accountable if something goes wrong?
Exactly. And who do regulators go after? These are questions the courts are still grappling with. And this case might provide some clues about how they're approaching the legal challenges posed by decentralization.
This is a lot to unpack. It's clear that this case goes far beyond Richard Hart and his projects. It's about the future of finance and this evolving relationship between governments and these decentralized technologies.
Absolutely. It highlights that we're still in the Wild West days of crypto. The rule book is being written as we speak, and the stakes are incredibly high.
It's an exciting time to be following this space, and I can't wait to see what happens next. But for now, let's take a quick pause and gather our thoughts. We'll be right back with our final takeaways from this landmark case.
Oh, okay, we're back. Ready to wrap up our deep dive into this captivating legal battle between Richard Hart and the SEC. We've untangled the key arguments, explored the possible outcomes, and considered those broader implications for the future of crypto. Now let's bring it all home. What can you, our listener, take away from this wild ride?
I think this case has really highlighted the tension that exists between our traditional expectations of finance and the disruptive force of decentralized technologies.
Yeah, it's like watching this head-on collision between the old guard and the new frontier.
Exactly. And it forces us to reconsider our assumptions. For example, the idea of charitable donations as a legal defense in a securities fraud case. That's not something you see every day. It definitely adds a whole new layer of complexity.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with some final food for thought. We've talked about the potential for this case to set legal precedents, reshape regulations, and influence the future of decentralized finance. But on a personal level, what does this all mean for you? How does this case change your perspective on crypto, on regulation, on the future of finance itself?
It's a reminder that we're living in a time of unprecedented technological and financial transformation. The rules are being rewritten as we speak. And it's up to each of us to stay informed, engaged, and adaptable.
This deep dive has been an absolute whirlwind. We've uncovered hidden twists, debated these complex arguments, and grappled with questions that could reshape the entire financial landscape. But this is just the beginning of the story. What happens next is still unfolding, and the outcome of this case could have these ripple effects we can't even predict yet.
It's a reminder that the world of crypto is dynamic, unpredictable, and full of potential. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting to explore this space, staying curious and informed is crucial.
Absolutely. We encourage you to keep an eye on this case as it develops and consider those broader implications for the future of finance. This is a story that's far from over, and we'll be here to help you navigate the twists and turns along the way. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring this fascinating world that's unfolding around us.